Today, we are taking a scalpel to a massive stack of recent reports. We're talking 2025 forecasts, a lot of it built on 2024 data, and they really reveal a globally fractured, rapidly changing landscape. Our mission today is pretty clear. We want to cut through all the noise and really identify the major trends that you need to know about. We're tracking some tectonic shifts in strategic power, where alliances are hardening, new resources are coming online. But at the same time, we're looking at a huge acceleration in domestic civil rights crises right here in the U.S.
Yeah, and what stands out immediately when you look through these sources is the sheer paradox. It defines this period. We're basically tracking two deeply divergent narratives playing out simultaneously. On one side, you absolutely see significant rising cultural celebration, real institutional power, genuine economic opportunity opening up across the wider Muslim world and neighboring regions too. But running right alongside that is intense military political friction on the global stage and, like you said, a documented, really serious civil rights emergency happening domestically, particularly in the West. This year, it's just defined by these sharp, kind of uncomfortable juxtapositions.
And we absolutely have to start there, I think, with that juxtaposition. Let's look first at the American civil rights and cultural landscape, because the findings from the Council on American Islamic Relations, their 2025 report, honestly, they're shocking. Just the scale and also the nature of the targeting.
They absolutely are. I mean, CR recorded 8,658 complaints nationwide in 2024. Just think about that number.
Wow.
That is the highest number they've ever recorded since they started doing these reports back in 1996. And critically, it's a 7.4% jump from 2023.
Which was already a record year, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
2023 was already the previous record. So the sheer volume of complaints is, well, it's unprecedented.
But here's where it gets, I think, even deeper. The report explicitly notes this fundamental shift in why people are being targeted. Historically, complaints often centered on someone's faith, their heritage. But in 2024, the documents show people were targeted, yes, sometimes because of religion, but specifically for their, and this is the quote, anti-genocide and anti-apartheid viewpoint.
Right, that's the crucial distinction.
And this group being targeted, it wasn't just Muslims, Palestinians, and Arabs. It also explicitly included Jews, African Americans, and Asian Americans.
That is the seismic shift. I mean, it moves it from discrimination based purely on identity, which is bad enough, towards actual repression based on political speech, on your viewpoint.
Yeah.
And if you look at the breakdown, the categories, for the first time ever, employment discrimination was the #1 type of incident reported. That made up 15.4% of all complaints.
So that's not just a few awkward HR meetings.
No, it means speaking out about major global political issues is becoming professionally toxic for minorities across the U.S. It has real-world consequences for people's livelihoods.
And that repression, it wasn't just limited to the workplace, was it? The report detailed this massive spike in encounters with law enforcement.
A staggering spike, a 71.5% increase in just 1 year. It went from 295 incidents in 2023 up to 506 in 2024.
Wow.
And the report makes a direct connection there. It notes this spike coincided very clearly with the student anti-genocide encampments that were happening on campuses.
And these aren't just statistics, are they? I mean, the report grounded this in real human tragedy.
It's vital to remember, yeah. These data points translate directly into terrible real-world events. The report cited several examples, the attempted drowning of 2 Muslim children in Texas by a woman who reportedly threatened to kill their mother.
Yeah.
The assault in Illinois, it was at a Panera Bread directed at someone just for wearing a Palestine hoodie. And then the Florida man who was sentenced for tearing off a Muslim U.S. Postal Service worker's hijab and then attacking her. I mean, the level of volatility and just explicit hate being reported was extremely high.
Yeah, okay, we have to hold that really grim domestic picture right next to this international narrative of, massive cultural triumph. It's that paradox again.
Exactly.
While one part of the world feels politically repressed, another is really celebrating its cultural zenith. Which brings us to the Islamic Arts Biennale, the 2025 edition that opened in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and the scale of this event is what makes it so fascinating in this context. I mean, this is the world's first and currently only biennial exhibition dedicated specifically to Islamic civilization arts. The 2025 edition, it's titled, "And All That Is in Between."
Okay.
It's housed in this absolutely sprawling space, 100,000 square meters, and it features over 500 objects, some ancient history, right alongside works by more than 30 contemporary artists. It's huge.
Wait, the institutional buy-in, though, that sounds enormous, too.
Right.
They got loans from some really heavy hitters globally.
Absolutely. We're talking loans from over 30 leading global institutions. Think the Vatican Apostolic Library.
Wow.
The Louvre in Paris, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. I mean, top tier. But maybe the most significant cultural flex, the real statement piece, came in the form of a specific artifact.
What was that?
The 2025 edition hosted the first ever public display of the entire kiswa, that's the cloth that covers the Holy Kaaba, the first time it's ever been shown outside of Makkah itself.
The whole thing, outside Makkah.
The entire kiswa. So look, this isn't just some art show. This is Saudi Arabia deploying soft power, deploying cultural diplomacy on a monumental scale. They're positioning themselves as the global patron of Islamic civilization. Right at the moment, political friction elsewhere is arguably at its highest.
That really does drive home that central contrast we talked about. Okay, let's shift gears now. From culture and civil rights, let's look at the changing dynamics of strategic power. Our sources are suggesting 2025 is a major turning point for Pakistan. Shifting it away from this state often seen as, maybe economically fragile, towards real international momentum.
And a lot of that momentum, it seems to start literally beneath the surface resources. Pakistan is apparently sitting on estimated copper and gold reserves valued at a staggering $60 billion.
$60 billion?
$60 billion. Think about the Reko Diq mine. It's projected to have something like a 25% rate of return. And crucially, it's going to use solar-powered mining.
Okay, that's interesting.
That kind of scale combined with that kind of, technological and environmental commitment, it attracts major global attention. And we're seeing that there's a signaled $500 million U.S. investment just in their mineral sector alone.
Plus, there were those reports about newly discovered oil reserves in Pakistan's territorial waters. That could be huge for them, potentially reducing import dependence. A massive economic stabilizer if it pans out.
Absolutely. But resource diplomacy, that's not the only driver here. Military assertiveness is also a really key part of the picture in 2025.
Right, we saw that play out very clearly after India's Operation Sindoor. Pakistan's counter-operation, codenamed Buyan al-Marsoos, it seemed to demonstrate a major leap forward in their deterrence capability. The sources are confirming they successfully downed 6 Indian aircraft, and that included advanced Rafales.
Yeah, and they also successfully launched their Shaheen-I missiles against key military installations in India. It was a robust response.
And that show of force, it seems it immediately elevated Pakistan's standing in international security circles. But the real, maybe game changer in terms of alliance shifts wasn't necessarily with their traditional partners. It was that strategic mutual defense agreement they signed with Saudi Arabia.
Ah, yes, that agreement. It's been widely publicized, some calling it the first Muslim NATO, and it is highly significant.
What does it actually commit them to?
Well, it commits both states, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, to treat aggression against one as aggression against the other. It expands cooperation across conventional forces, crucially nuclear policy and intelligence sharing.
Okay.
And the context here is absolutely vital. This agreement was signed following what was perceived as a U.S. security vacuum in the region, specifically amid waning trust in Washington after Israel strikes inside Qatar. So they're essentially building their own security net.
So, okay, they're diversifying their security partnerships, building this new pillar with Saudi Arabia, but China still remains absolutely central to their strategic thinking, right?
Undeniably. China is still the leading security partner. It was confirmed they provided vital intelligence support and advanced weaponry during that recent conflict with India. And of course, China is Pakistan's largest foreign investor through CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and it's their leading trade partner. China is the anchor in many ways.
Meanwhile, that very complex U.S. relationship seems to be experiencing something of a thaw. President Trump has publicly praised Pakistan's leadership, their military's performance.
Yes. And economically, Pakistan does benefit from having the lowest U.S. tariff rate in South Asia. It's currently at 19%, but... Yeah, there's always a but with U.S.-Pakistan ties, isn't there? Exactly. We absolutely have to view this current thawing with real caution, just given the historically volatile up and down nature of that relationship.
It's never straightforward.
Never. Long-term regional stability is going to depend on these emerging strategic frameworks actually holding up, not just on sort of temporary political conveniences.
Okay, let's broaden the scope now to the wider region. Global tensions, economic resilience across MENA, North Africa. The nuclear friction with Iran seems to have hit a new peak on October 5th, 2025. That's when Iran declared that its nuclear cooperation with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, is, quote, no longer relevant.
Yeah, that was a big moment. That declaration came right after Britain, France, and Germany triggered those snapback sanctions on Iran, accusing them of non-compliance with nuclear deal terms.
Right.
Now, Iran maintained its commitment to its NPT obligations, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But the sources note they strongly criticized the European countries for, in their words, eliminating the justification for negotiations.
So this isn't just procedural talk.
No, it's far more than rhetoric. It signals a fundamental breakdown in that diplomatic framework that the U.S. and Europe had, painstakingly tried to maintain for years.
And regionally, instability just keeps swirling around that Gaza ceasefire, the one reached back in January 2025. There's still total uncertainty about long-term governance there.
Total uncertainty. And Israel looks likely to maintain a military presence inside Gaza, while at the same time accelerating annexation efforts over in the West Bank. So the core issues remain unresolved.
And that uncertainty, that feeds directly into the ongoing situation in Yemen, doesn't it?
Directly. The Houthis paused their attacks in the Red Sea after the ceasefire, but they're widely expected to resume if that ceasefire collapses or is seriously violated. And concurrently, Iran is visibly increasing its support to the Houthis, maintaining its proxy leverage and influence over those critical shipping lanes.
So beyond these state-level conflicts, we still have these persistent transnational security threats bubbling up. Afghanistan remains a complex haven.
Very complex. Al-Qaeda is reportedly keeping a relatively low profile, but is strengthening its core, while ISK, the Islamic State Khorasan province, mounts frequent, often very deadly attacks.
And the instability in Syria, especially after the fall of the Assad regime, that risks further fragmentation, doesn't it? Which groups like IS and Al-Qaeda could exploit.
Easily exploit, yeah, creating new bases, new opportunities. And we see this ripple effect extending into North Africa, too, specifically in Mali. Authorities there had to extend the curfew in the Kayes region because of escalating violent attacks by armed groups linked to al-Qaeda, specifically GSIM.
Right.
And the situation there is just compounded by these widening diplomatic tensions with France, which recently expelled Malian envoys and suspended its counterterrorism ties. It's getting very messy.
Okay, that is a huge list of geopolitical headaches. So, given all that turbulence, how is the region's economic bedrock, the GCC states, actually managing? The GCC economy report, it projects pretty solid growth, surprisingly.
The forecast is actually quite robust, yeah. 3.2% growth projected for the GCC economy in 2025. That's up significantly from 1.7% in 2024.
What's driving that?
It's heavily driven by two main factors. First, the easing of those OPEC plus oil supply restrictions, so more oil revenue coming in. But second, and maybe more importantly long-term, a strong 3.7% expansion in the non-oil sectors across the GCC.
So they really are succeeding in diversifying away from oil dependence.
They're actively working on it and seeing results. Now, what impact did that Red Sea shipping crisis have, particularly on trade through the Strait of Hormuz?
Good question.
Well, we learned that the Red Sea crisis led to about a 6% drop in traffic through Hormuz between November 2023 and April 2025. But this actually forced some innovation.
How so?
Major exporters like Saudi Arabia and Qatar had to pivot rapidly to redirect more of their shipments towards Asian markets, finding alternative routes and buyers.
Interesting. Okay, we should probably look at debt levels too, because the picture isn't uniform across all the Gulf states, is it?
No, definitely not. Oman, Qatar, and the UAE, they managed to maintain stable debt levels, which signals pretty strong fiscal prudence.
Okay.
But Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Kuwait all saw their debt levels increase. Bahrain, in particular, is one to watch closely. It's projected to hit a pretty concerning 131% debt-to-GDP ratio by 2026.
Wow, 131%. What does that signify?
It means their revenue growth, especially from those crucial non-oil sources, just isn't keeping pace with their government spending commitments. And that creates significant long-term vulnerability if it's not addressed.
But despite those divergences on debt, inflation seems remarkably contained across the region, holding it at an average of just 2.0% in 2024.
That stability is largely, you could say, manufactured through policy. Continued government subsidies on key goods play a role, and crucially, those currency pegs to the US dollar keep import prices stable.
Right.
But while those pegs contain inflation, they also limit the fiscal maneuverability that governments might need for deeper structural reforms down the line. So it's a delicate balancing act they're performing.
Okay, and finally, one other big economic trend. We're seeing this huge strategic pivot in North Africa towards renewable energy. Countries there are aggressively seeking foreign investment in clean energy projects.
Yeah, this trend is being directly fueled by Europe's ongoing energy instability fears, largely stemming from the post-Ukraine situation. Europe is desperate for alternative, reliable energy supplies, and North Africa is perfectly positioned geographically to offer that.
And it's not just European money coming in.
No, and that's what makes it really strategic. It's attracting significant investment not just from European partners, but also from Gulf countries. They see it as a way to gain strategic positioning and future influence across the African continent. It's a massive diversification play, really, funded by geopolitical necessity.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all back together then. For 2025, what we're watching are these massive geopolitical realignments. You've got Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, China building their own security architectures, partly in response to perceived U.S. retreats or unreliability. We see these crucial economic pivots, the GCC really doubling down on non-oil growth, North African renewables taking off, fueled by external demand. But all this prosperity and strategic strengthening in some parts of the world, it's set against that sharp increase in domestic civil rights complaints back here in the U.S., explicitly linked now to political viewpoints.
Which really raises a powerful, maybe provocative question for you, the listener, to think about, especially when you consider how interconnected all these events really are.
Go on.
Well, the Kiai report documented this unprecedented repression of specific viewpoints, anti-genocide viewpoints happening in the West. Now, given that U.S. foreign policy, particularly under Trump, seems focused on expanding things like the Abraham Accords and maximizing pressure on players like Iran,
Right.
how might the domestic treatment of advocacy groups and minorities here in the West, that feeling of political vulnerability and repression documented in the report, how might that impact the willingness of key regional players, countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, even Turkey, to seriously engage with U.S.-led diplomatic efforts in the future?
I mean, do these domestic civil rights issues now inadvertently create international leverage or perhaps mistrust that affects U.S. foreign policy goals?
That is a truly challenging question, something for all of us to consider. That was the deep dive.